Hi, here I am recording my presentation in my studio. Okay, as you know from the readings, the topic is unusual fears in autism. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the biology of fear and where it comes from. Then we can discuss some of the outcomes of the articles. Okay, what is fear? I found a lot of definitions for this. Some of them overlapped, some of them didn't. But in general, a lot of psychologists believe that fear is an innate emotion that we are born with. It's like a defense mechanism. Like if we didn't have fear, we wouldn't survive. But unfortunately, like over time, our fear has adapted towards a lot of things that um, are not dangerous anymore, but we feel endangered, um, like fear of interviews, deadlines, social gathering, public speaking, presentations. Um, there are a lot of reasons for fear. It's actually quite complicated, but the general classification can be biological and evolutionary is something um, that's in our DNA. So it causes the physical symptoms like fight or flight or freeze to danger. It can be social or classical conditioning. It's learned, so it's based on the culture you grew up in, the environment, um, the relationship you had with your parents, the people around you, and many other factors. Fear can also be explained um, by social cognitive theory. So that says people learn by observing others. So sometimes you just observe somebody else's negative consequences in life or some events. You don't want to go through the same cycle. So you develop a fear for their fear. So in general, fear can be divided into two categories: rational versus irrational. Rational is the fear of real danger and possible consequences. Irrational fear, on the other hand, doesn't have any rational reason, so it's abnormal. And when you have it, you just try to avoid the situation, events, or objects that are related to your irrational fear. And if it's really intense, you develop anxiety. So that's why in DSM-5, phobia is actually under the category of anxiety, like it's an anxiety disorder. Um, there, the big difference between fear and anxiety is that fear is a stress response from an immediate danger, but anxiety is a stress response um, based on the fear that you have in your thoughts. But the way your body, your mind responds, your system responds to fear is basically the same. Like your body doesn't differentiate fear and anxiety in terms of response. And one of the questions I came up with when I was doing research for this project was that um, can we actually divide um, fear into two categories, like rational versus irrational? Because if fear is just an experience, then rational and irrational would be relative. So I'm interested in knowing your ideas about this. For example, if a scientist is working on global warming, and because of the research, um, the researcher is worried about the future of Earth. Is the fear irrational or rational? Like, to people who have no idea what global warming is, would that fear be irrational? So this is something we can talk about. Um, Importance of research on anxiety in ASD, it is actually, it's very important, like, because autistic individuals have a high level of anxiety, but I found very little research about fear in autism. Um, and phobias can impair functioning in children who have autism. So early intervention is very important and helpful. There are actually a lot of treatments, like evidence-based treatments, that can reduce or eliminate these fears. Sonia will go over one intervention after this presentation. Um, in one of the readings, assigned readings, um, which was on anxiety, unusual fears in autism, made this study. That was a really good, strong study because the sample size is very large. And also, they divide the fear into anxiety and phobia, hypersensitivity, and fears. And they explained very well. I found it a nice, informative study. Um, high high functioning, you can, based on their study and other studies, 79% of individuals with high functioning autism have anxiety. In low functioning autism, that's 67%, and that's based on a study of over 1,000 kids. Um, Hypersensitivity is another issue that children with autism are dealing with. They get easily upset and have difficulty tolerating new situations and certain sensory experiences. Um, this is something interesting because I don't have autism, but I totally um, have that experience. Like, I'm very sensitive to fluctuation of light and temperature, texture, and if I'm not in the right environment, it can completely shut me down. So that's actually one of the reasons I record my presentations sometimes, because I'm just worried I might be in a different mood or situation. So just I'd like to have a backup plan. Um, Fear in autism is actually, like, fear is one of the symptoms, is symptom number 28 on CAST. And I want to talk about a little bit about CAST. It's checklist for autism spectrum disorder. There are 30 symptoms of autism on the list. The information is gathered through parents, caretakers, or teachers. It's done, like, the amount of time that's needed is between 15 to 20, and it's for children between 1 to 16 years of age. And the cutoff score is 15 for HFA or LFA, high functioning, low functioning. And the sample size, as I said, was quite large. It's 1,033. 41% of the children represented 92 different fears. Many additional children had common childhood fears like dogs, bugs, and the darkness. Um, More than half of children with unusual fears had fears of mechanical things, height, and weather. And the most common unusual fear was fear of toilets. And the most common category was fear of mechanical things, like around 24%. This is something to pay attention to. The percentage of ASD children versus TD and children with other disorders. 40% of ASD children have an odd or intense fear or phobias, and that is as opposed to less than 5% of children in the general population, and that includes ADHD, language disorder, and mental retardation. And girls had more unusual fears than boys, and that's consistent with the general same ratio in the general population. So frequent fears of autism was fear of thunderstorm, big crowds, and closed places. And the frequent fears of autism were not among the 10 most common fears for typical children, like as I said, dogs, spiders, snakes. In a study by Madsen and Love in 1990, there was a fear list with, I believe, 80 items on it. So when they were given to the parents of autistic children and TD, parents of TD added 2 more fears, while parents of autistic children added 12 more, like stairways, noises, machinery, taking a shower, crying, thunder, lightning, and changes in ground texture, and so on, like completely different types of fears. One of the things that I found interesting, like I paused when I read the paragraph, was that many of the fears reported in this study were actually consistent with the fears that Kanner explained in his paper, mentioned in the paper, like fear of vacuum cleaners, and elevators, mechanical toys, swings, and the wind. And this is another thing to think about. If after 7 years the fears are sort of the same, does that mean that the reason can be genetic, or I don't want to give my own opinion, because I want to just, this is like open for discussion, but a lot of things have changed, especially like technology, but like parental education, a lot of other things. But how come you just see exactly the same pattern? So this is something to think about. So that was the question I just explained, and it was something I came up with. Another question I want you to think about is that how does understanding fear in children with autism help researchers understand autism in general? Like, is there any connection between these two topics? And number 3, could fear and anxiety in autism interfere with learning and attention? So some possible explanations, but we'll go over this in class. So things to remember about autism. We just gotta remember what is tolerable for most children. Really simple, fun experiences like clouds in the sky, the moon. My son loves the moon in the sky. A change in activity or routines. Um, these are terrifying. They are horrible experiences for a child with autism. The other thing is that um, these fears are not consistent across all autistic children. Like it can be very fearful for some children and kind of enjoyable for the others. So they're not consistent. And ASD children perceive, experience, and react to the world differently than children without autism. So again, back to neurodiversity is always open for discussion. Um, okay, can sticking to routine, stimming, echolalia, aggression, um, like repetitive behaviors in autism, um, can these be reactions to fear? Um, Nobody knows, but we can discuss it. And would it be fair to say that an autistic child is afraid of things that are harmless? This is kind of like rational, irrational discussion. And the second study was fear of being laughed at. Um, this study was done by Samson et al. In 2010. Um, the goal of this study was to investigate the relationship between Asperger's syndrome and the concepts of glottophobia, glottophilia, and cataglasticism. Um, some people pronounce this gelatophobia, but it's actually glottophobia because glos in Greek means laughter and phobia means fear. So glottophobia is the fear of being laughed at. Glottophilia, the joy of being laughed at, and cataglasticism, the joy of laughing at others. So 3 pictures for you so you can remember. The first one, glottophobia, second one, glottophilia, and you know this guy, Nelson, cataglasticism. Okay, who are glottophobes? They do not experience laughter and smiling from their interaction partners. They are very sensitive and observant. And when they are with other people, they always think they are the target. So they always assume that the laughter is directed at them. I've seen such people before. Not fun. So in this study, there were 2 groups, Asperger's and healthy control. They completed online questionnaires and went through a bunch of assessments like REC and AQK. The sample size for Asperger was 40, the control was 83. The individuals with Asperger's reported having a higher intensity of the experience they had before, and also scored higher on the glottophobia scale. And they perceived their previous experiences really intimidating and very intense. But no differences were found in cataglasticism between the control and Asperger's. So the summary of this study was 45% of individuals with Asperger's, um, like compared to the other groups, um, had glottophobia. Um, and compared to the controls, they had a bad memory of it. Like they had a more negative, like more intense um, memory of the event. Um, and also individuals with Asperger's are less able to laugh at themselves. So they scored lower on glottophilia. But as I said, in cataglasticism, they scored the same. Um, there are a lot of theories behind this, but one of them is, for example, reduced theory of mind. Um, so they're not able to socialize with people, they don't have enough social awareness, so they can't understand what's going on, and they cannot differentiate between, for example, a good experience versus a bad experience. Um, they, and like lack of understanding of people's behaviors, like body language, smile, um, and other emotions. Um, so a couple of questions to think about. The first one, what factors lead to the development of the fear of being laughed at, like glottophobia? Did you have any experience before, or do you know anybody who had that experience, and can you share it with us? And number two, do individuals with Asperger's have a stronger memory of the past experiences in general? Like, have you read about it? Do you know anything about it? These are possible explanations. I'll go over it in class. Um, and one more study, this wasn't part of the reading, but I found another study on glottophobia in autism that was done in 2014 in Taiwan. So I just brought the outcome of this study so we can just, compare with the previous ones and get a second opinion. Um, the sample size was 264, and the control group was 163, and Asperger's, oh no, sorry, autistic kids were 101. And they actually mentioned that the results were consistent with the results of Samson et al. Study. So in terms of glottophobia and glottophilia and the cataglasticism, they actually got the same results. But they also studied one more factor that was connected, like one more variable that was connected to glottophobia in autistic children and adolescents. And that was parental attachment. The result of this study was that in the autism group, the participants' tendency towards glottophobia had a positive correlation, had a negative correlation with paternal attachment, but didn't have any correlation with maternal attachment. So that means if they had a better relationship with their fathers, they scored lower on glottophobia. I don't know about that. I don't know. I couldn't find any other study on it, but I think this can be controversial. Okay, so the second part of the presentation is about intervention. So Sonia will take care of this. Thanks for watching.